Welcome to our explainer on federal immigration enforcement stops and the serious risks of obstruction. In this video, we will break down the legal standards for encounters, detentions, and arrests, and we will clarify what actions can lead to felony charges for interference. We will move step by step, beginning with context, then examining reasonable suspicion, the 100-mile border zone, and the specific actions that can constitute obstruction. We will include a clear disclaimer that this is not legal advice. Let's begin. Public interactions with federal immigration agencies can be contentious and confusing. Understanding the minimal legal threshold for initiating an encounter and the distinction between consensual interactions, detentions, and arrests is critical. Equally important is understanding the criminal risks associated with interfering in these operations, even when trying to help someone you know. We will explore the legal standards step by step. Here is our agenda. First, legal thresholds. Voluntary encounters versus detentions and arrests. Second, we will compare reasonable suspicion and probable cause. Third, we will discuss the 100-mile border zone. Fourth, we will list actions that constitute felony obstruction, if them. We will provide lawful response guidance for bystanders. Finally, we will test your understanding with quick quizzes. Disclaimer. This video provides general information and is not legal advice. Laws and enforcement practices can vary by jurisdiction and may change. If you have specific questions about your circumstances, consult a licensed attorney. Do not rely on this video for decisions in a live encounter. Let us begin with the difference between voluntary encounters and detentions. In public spaces, officers can approach and ask questions without any justification. That interaction is voluntary, meaning you may decline to answer and walk away, unless the officer indicates you are being detained. A detention requires reasonable suspicion, a lower threshold than probable cause. Reasonable suspicion is the belief, based on specific and articulable facts, that a person might be involved in a violation. By contrast, probable cause is a higher standard, needed for an arrest, indicating a fair probability that a crime has been committed by the person. Detentions should be brief and are meant to resolve identity or status questions, after which a person should be released promptly if no further grounds exist. Now we compare reasonable suspicion and probable cause. Reasonable suspicion is a specific, articulable basis for suspecting a person might be violating the law. It is a lower threshold than probable cause. Probable cause is a higher standard, based on facts and circumstances that would lead a reasonable person to believe that a crime was committed by the individual. In immigration enforcement contexts, courts have permitted a broader set of considerations for reasonable suspicion, some of which are controversial because they may resemble racial or linguistic profiling. Reasonable suspicion permits a brief investigatory stop, while probable cause is required for a full custodial arrest and more intrusive searches. A practical way to clarify your status is to ask, calmly, if you are free to leave. Next, the 100-mile border zone. Within 100 miles of any United States land or maritime border, federal immigration enforcement operates with broader authority, including the use of checkpoints and increased screening at transportation hubs in coastal areas. However, even in this zone, officers must still meet reasonable suspicion for detentions and probable cause for arrests. The practical effect is more frequent encounters and wider screening discretion. Individuals should be prepared for increased interactions in these areas. Moving on, U.S. citizens cannot be deported. However, officers may briefly detain a person to verify citizenship or lawful presence if they have reasonable suspicion. Once citizenship is confirmed, the detention should be concluded without undue delay. Carrying identification may help speed up this process, though the absence of identification is not evidence of wrongdoing. As always, remain calm and avoid escalating the situation. Now, we need to address obstruction. Federal immigration enforcement is a law enforcement agency. Interfering with its official duties can constitute a felony. This risk exists regardless of whether the person being detained is a United States citizen or a non-citizen. Well-intentioned spouses, friends, or bystanders who try to intervene physically or block officers can be arrested and prosecuted. Let us detail the forms of obstruction that can trigger felony charges. First, physically blocking enforcement vehicles or personnel. Second, obstructing access to buildings, doorways, or passageways during operations. Third, pulling or attempting to physically remove someone from an officer's custody. Fourth, damaging or tampering with enforcement equipment or property. Fifth, making physical movements or verbal threats intended to intimidate or force officers to withdraw. 6th, entering private or restricted areas where operations are being conducted. These actions are not protected forms of protest and can result in immediate arrest and prosecution. Here is a side-by-side comparison. Lawful advocacy can include recording from a safe and lawful distance, observing and taking notes of the time, location, and identifying information such as badge numbers, asking calmly whether you are being detained if you are directly involved, and seeking legal counsel or filing complaints after the event. Unlawful obstruction includes surrounding or blocking officers or vehicles, preventing access to doors or corridors, physically attempting to remove someone from custody, and damaging or tampering with equipment. The distinction is conduct-based. Advocacy remains non-interfering and observational, while obstruction involves physical interference or intimidation. If you witness an immigration stop, maintain a safe distance, and avoid interference. Keep pathways clear. Where lawful in your jurisdiction, you may record from a safe distance, ensuring you do not block, impede, or closely follow officers. Remain calm and avoid threatening language or sudden movements. If officers engage with you, comply with lawful orders and ask respectfully if you are free to leave. After the event, document what you observed and consider consulting an attorney or rights organization if needed. Always prioritize safety and legality. Quiz time. The question is, what legal standard is required for federal officers to detain someone temporarily for investigation? The options are A, no standard at all, B, reasonable suspicion, C, probable cause, and D, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is B, reasonable suspicion. Temporary detentions require reasonable suspicion, which is a lower threshold than probable cause. Probable cause is required for an arrest, not for a brief investigatory stop. Here is the second quiz question. Which action could constitute felony obstruction during a federal immigration operation? The options are A, recording from a safe distance where lawful, B, asking if you are free to leave, C, physically blocking an enforcement vehicle, and D, taking notes about time and location. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is C, physically blocking an enforcement vehicle. Physical interference, including blocking vehicles, obstructing pathways, or attempting to pull someone from custody, can constitute felony obstruction. The other options describe forms of lawful observation or inquiry, when done without interference and where permitted. This timeline shows the progression of a typical encounter. It begins when an officer approaches in a public space. Initially, the interaction may be voluntary. If reasonable suspicion develops, the officer may conduct a temporary detention to investigate. During detention, identity or status checks occur. If probable cause does not develop, the individual should be released promptly. If probable cause arises, the encounter escalates to an arrest. The diagram underscores that detentions are meant to be brief and investigative, not indefinite. This table summarizes 3 tiers. A consensual encounter requires no justification and allows the person to walk away. Reasonable suspicion is based on specific and articulable facts, suggesting possible violation. It justifies a brief detention, during which you are not free to leave. Probable cause indicates a fair probability that the person committed a crime and supports an arrest, as well as more intrusive investigative steps. These categories align with the trajectory from approach to detention to potential arrest. Here is a short Markdown formatted refresher of key definitions. A consensual encounter means you are free to go. Reasonable suspicion indicates the officer believes you might be violating the law, based on specific facts. Probable cause is a stronger basis indicating a fair probability that a crime occurred. Remember that laws evolve. Consult a qualified attorney for specific legal advice. Phrases such as asking if you are being detained or if you are free to leave may clarify your status during an encounter. These are the key takeaways. 1. Officers can approach anyone in public for questions. You may decline unless you are detained. 2. Detentions require reasonable suspicion. Arrests require probable cause. 3. The 100-mile border zone expands enforcement activity, but does not eliminate the RS and PC requirements. 4. Obstruction is a felony. Do not physically interfere or block operations. 5. Observe lawfully. document safely, and consult legal counsel afterward if needed. To wrap up, distinguish clearly between voluntary encounters, detentions, and arrests. Remember that reasonable suspicion is a low threshold, while probable cause is higher and required for an arrest. Never interfere physically with federal operations because obstruction is a felony risk. When in doubt, prioritize safety, maintain distance, and seek legal advice. Thank you for watching. If you found this useful, please like, share, and subscribe. We would love to hear your questions and experiences in the comments. Your feedback helps us make more clear and helpful explainers.